you can take over-the-counter allergy medicine, whether you know you have an allergy or not. So go right ahead.
Yep. As Gen 2 antihistamines have basically zero side effects.
The symptom reduced. So I buy the bulk generic one, and then I got it for Costco. I can load up, and then.
But yeah, apparently from what I've been reading a lot about it, because I have severe allergies. Like I got shots and everything back in the day.
Severe.
So mine are not even close to the most severe types. But
well, the most severe is like dying from a bee sting.
Yep. So what I'm looking into is there's a new form of thing that's kind of like allergy shots, but you don't have to go to the doctor to do it because it's not shots. You just like put a tab in your mouth a couple times a day, and then you do it replaces the shots. So I might try that. But apparently, it's climate change has moved what pollen is where and increased the total amount of pollen and the length of the season with pollen. So everywhere in the world, people who have never had allergies are getting allergies because of the sheer amount of pollen. And it's only going to get worse.
But yeah, it's, my symptom reduced, so I just kept taking them.
Yeah.
And
because like I said, Claritin and all those
symptom, and it's like, am I going to not stop and taking it? There's no way.
And you probably are low enough symptoms where you don't want to take the more advanced drugs like the steroid or the cromolyn sodium.
It's a generic version of, I don't know.
Zyrtec, I assume?
I always get confused between Zyrtec and Zantac.
Yeah, Zyrtec. I still do good old loratadine or Claritin because they basically all work the same.
Because I buy the generic one, the name I remember is cetirizine, which is the actual name of the whatever it is.
They're pretty much functionally equivalent from all I've ever learned about them.
Cetirizine is a medication used in the treatment.
I used to take Rhinotan, but I don't think they even give that to people anymore. But the next step up is you take cromolyn sodium. That's that weird stuff I used to use at RIT that tastes bad.
Whatever.
All right, send me your video, and I'm going to record.
Right, the video. I turned the lights on, and I didn't turn the video on.
I started streaming a little moment ago anyway, so. All right. And I have hit record. Oh, God. That will come into the show.
I know. Well, it'll come into the
it'll come into the Discord, the live stream only, but it won't affect the actual show. I'm going to add a few choice ones to our server and the GeekNights server.
Put a let's do this in there.
I should. Up to 5 seconds you can put in Discord.
Let's do this is less than 5 seconds.
Exactly. All right. Guess we're just good to go. Thought Bird's going to be an important one.
Wilhelm scream.
Yep.
What?
Maybe a couple of Schwarzenegger quotes. I feel like that might be useful.
I feel like there's got to be some Doom noises.
Oh, just every sound effect from Doom.
Maybe like, it's like there's a lot. Or, a Mario coin, a Mario jump.
Oh, think of a choice bit. I got to see what the limit is and how many I can upload to our server, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, here's either a Metroid. That might be too long. Metroid getting an item. It might be 6 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's Zelda. You can get do 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 do.
We could get the extended 1-up sound from Mario 3.
That one?
No, the one that goes do. You don't know about that one? I recommend, total aside, I actually started watching Bitchy Flower Power's actual YouTube channel, and I have learned.
I watched him on Twitch sometimes.
I have learned things that are not only did I not know about Mario 3, but he
knows is literally the greatest Mario 3 person.
I learned shocking things about Mario 3 that surprised me, even now in the year 2023. But also, because he's kind of young, he didn't actually know how a Game Genie worked, and got one and was mystified by it. All right. Anyway, I think
he's a person who does one thing: play Mario 3 fast. And some other games, but
I mean, if I was still running stuff at Kineticon, I would definitely try to get him as a guest.
Good luck with that.
All right. Move the
push
marker.
Record.
All right. And it's Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about Makoto Shinkai's latest, Suzume. So, in New York City, we got the City Bike, which is our like docked bike share program. Like it's pretty good. Like I use these bikes a lot in my day-to-day life.
It's like the biggest bike share thing ever.
And New York now is just
it's the biggest in the world. It's the biggest in the U.S.
It's the same system basically that's in like Paris and all these other cities, but in New York, like I use this most of the time. Like I use my real bike to go on like a bike trip or bike somewhere far.
Is decent, and I'm going pretty much anywhere that there are city bike docks, and City Bike will get me there fast enough. It is the best choice.
Yeah. In fact, when I had to get my, remember when my camcorder, like the lens scratched itself internally at PAX South? Yeah. So to do the RMA to get the replacement, I boxed that giant thing up in this giant box. I strapped it to a City Bike and I biked to the FedEx store.
Yeah. You can do that.
So, and we have regular bikes, and about 20% of the system is e-bikes. And you have to pay a little bit if you use the e-bike compared to the City Bike.
Right, so you can get an annual membership, which is like if you have an annual membership, you can ride non-e-bikes, normal bikes, all you want. You can infinitely,
just free.
Basically, the thing is, any individual ride has to be under 45 minutes, and then you dock it and you take it right back out, and you can keep riding.
Yep.
If you hold one over 45 minutes, then you get charged. But an e-bike, as soon as you take an e-bike out, you start getting charged money.
And if you don't have an annual plan, they cost a lot. But if you have an annual plan,
you get charged a little bit.
Because I use them kind of often now, partly because if you're biking from our apartment in Queens to pretty much anywhere between Midtown and like Astor Place, it is as fast as the subway or faster, and it is cheaper than one swipe of the subway.
But it's not cheaper than a non-e-bike, which is
free. But if you need to get there with the speed of the subway, it is faster than the subway and cheaper than the subway.
I mean, I bike on a City Bike, unless it's a really far ride. It's, like any ride to Manhattan, if I leave the house and get on the City Bike right outside and someone else has to take a bus or walk to the subway, I'll get there basically the same time they get there.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
So
but
the non-e-bike is going to get you there faster than the subway.
My difference, the e-bike is way faster than the City Bike, only because we live next to the subway station, and I'm always going to places like my office next to the subway station, and it is still faster. But anyway, then we have regular e-bikes, like the first ones they rolled out, which are a little bit janky looking. Like they're a bit hinky in how they made them, but they work okay. But they made some new fancy ones that are big and white, and they're more like an e-motorbike. Like they're legit. They're way fast. They're like, I actually really like them. But there was a phenomenon in New York City and still happening, but less so than it used to, where you'll every now and then just see one of those things just like laying on the ground somewhere random in the city, like halfway across a bridge.
Way upstate and way far away from any City Bike.
Oh, we saw one right next to the bike path that goes off from the main bike path to Tarrytown. One of the white e-bikes.
Everyone saw that same one. It was sitting there.
I know. I went to the Reddit. I was going to like post it on Reddit, and I saw someone had already posted it, and a bunch of people were posting like their photos of it.
It might still be there.
And it's there to this day.
It could be.
So there were two there. I learned today of a second way that can happen, because the first way that it was happening, people would get one of those bikes out, and then they would like stop riding and park it somewhere. And because those bikes are extremely expensive, if you leave them somewhere like not moving for long enough, they assume that you abandoned them. They lock themselves so you can't even roll them. And anytime you start rolling them, a little siren goes like wee 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 wee, and they call for help. So the City Bike people can go get them. Like, I don't know why people were like taking these things out and just like parking them somewhere, because that would
people don't read the thing. It's just they do what they as soon as you get the bike out of the dock, it's like you can ride it freely.
Yep.
It's like there's nothing to stop you, right? From
like all the people we see getting on like the Staten Island ferry with them.
It's not like the bike yells at you and says, "Hey, if you don't bring me back to a dock in 1 minute, you're going to get charged this much money." It's like people, and especially if it's not on your card or anything, or you got the bike somehow else. It's like, people just go wild. And if the bike, ends up somewhere else, ends up
So yesterday, on my way home from work, I come out of work and I look, and there's one e-bike available, like right next to my office, and it's one of the white ones. So I go over and I put my little key in, and instead of just unlocking immediately, which is how this system works, it sits there blinking the yellow light for like 90 seconds. and I don't walk away because when I'm
you can't do that.
Because that'd be the worst possible thing. Because if someone
the red light and then pick a different one.
So then the red light comes on and the bike pops out of the dock.
Uh-oh. That's I've never seen that happen. That's the craziest bug I've ever seen.
Right? So I take the bike and it works. It's e-biking. Like it's working fine.
Well,
and
I would have slammed it back in.
And I look at my app and the app says I did not check it out.
Yeah, so that's why I would slam it back in because.
So I have stolen this e-bike if I want to just use it. So I decide to see, I bet it's going to lock up on me. And I just start biking home with it. And it totally works.
Lock up while you're riding.
So
I don't think it would because of safety.
It did lock up while I was riding.
Wow, interesting.
If they're stolen, they lock up. But the way it works, so I'm biking. I didn't make it far. I made it like a couple blocks. And I was biking along a path where I knew there were a lot of docks because I was confident this would happen. I was just curious about it. So I bike a little bit. And then the city bike just starts making the siren sound while I'm biking. And then it feels like the brakes were just very slowly engaged until it comes to a halt. And then it's just stuck. And I was about, I don't know, 50 yards away from a dock. Like I could see the dock. But then I realized I can't push it to the dock because the wheels are locked up.
Pick it up.
So I messaged City Bike and I was like, hey, I got this bike out and it locked up on me. I just played dumb. And they respond immediately. They're like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. That happens. Just leave it there. We'll find it.
Okay.
And I was like, you're sure? Just leave it here, like on the side of Lexington Avenue? And they're like, yeah, just leave it there. Don't worry about it. And I was like, this is official. I can just leave it here. I will not be charged. I didn't
have a recording of this conversation or you're all good.
Yep. I took like 4 screenshots of this conversation I had with them. And then I left. And that's my story.
I mean, if you lose the normal bike that has no
that's like $1,000 or something.
It's $1,200 if it's on your account. And I can't imagine if you lose the white e-bike, like, and you don't get it back into a dock and it's missing on your account. I can't imagine what they charge you. $5,000? I don't know.
Right? I don't ever want to find out. But so yeah, I stole an e-bike and that's what happens.
I'm spending $5,000 on a bike. At least I want to have the bike.
A $5,000 won't even buy you a good mountain bike.
$5,000 will buy you an excellent bike of any kind.
It'll buy you an okay mountain bike or an excellent, literally any other kind of bike.
That's nonsense. You can buy an excellent bike for $5,000.
Yeah, I've ridden $4,000 and $5,000 mountain bikes, but I did ride an $11,000 mountain bike once, and holy fuck, was that fun!
I can't imagine there'll be that much difference.
Well, you know what the difference was? The entire thing was carbon, so despite being a mountain bike with a full suspension, it didn't weigh anything. It had electronic shifters, and the suspension was like drop 20 feet and you don't even feel it. Anyway, in some anime news, I got a geek bite. Well, animation news, I got a geek bite because the Owl House, the Disney show, the fantasy horror comedy, fantastic show. I know I've talked about it a few times in Geek Nights. We all know it got canceled because Disney didn't really feel like it was part of their brand. They had an executive shakeup, and there was some drama about the fact that it was hard to push this show in certain markets like China because of the heavy LGBT content in it.
Oh, so it was something only, nerds cared about. A lot of nerds, but it wasn't a mass popular thing, right?
Yep.
It's not in the public consciousness.
So it got canceled, but they did let them. They couldn't make their third and final big season. So instead, they actually got the budget to make 3 basically made-for-TV movies with pretty high budgets, surprisingly.
Yeah, we discussed how this has become a trend of some sort.
And they actually did the thing that very few people do correctly in that situation. In those 3 movies, they successfully, in my opinion, and now that I've seen all of the Owl House, wholly and completely wrapped up the entire show, every open question, every loose thread, in a surprisingly satisfying and meaningful way. Like, I can't imagine they could have wrapped it up better. And in fact, it might have ended up being better than what it would have been if it hadn't been canceled. Because what happened was, I'm going to go all the way back to an anime that I hope Geek Nights listeners have watched. I don't think we've talked about this in over a decade on the show, but Escaflowne, a B+ or A- tier anime of all time. I'm not going to say S tier. It's S tier in my heart, but I'm not going to say it's S tier on any other scale. But it's a good show. One thing that made Escaflowne notable was that it was supposed to be 52 episodes. And for a bunch of reasons, mostly around budgets, it got cut to 26 episodes. So what did they do? After 13 episodes, the next 13 episodes, they just cut everything, all the filler, but told the same story. So this show accelerates.
All thriller, no filler.
Like, to a degree that is shocking. You go from typical fantasy story with robots to, what the fuck? Why is Isaac Newton here? Wait a minute, they have nukes? What's going on?
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers on Escaflowne. And I don't think that's really a spoiler, because you could watch 13 episodes of this show and think back to everything I just said and have no possible conception of how Isaac Newton and nuclear weapons are relevant.
It's a spoiler because in the show, right? Spoilers, I guess. Also additional spoilers, right? They from early on in the show, they're referring to this mysterious enemy who's like the big boss, right?
You're assuming it's like a wizard, like the wizard
right.
Isaac.
They're like, right? It's sort of like, there's a big bad guy named Isaac, sort of like in Star Wars. There's a big bad guy who's just the Emperor, and then eventually, finally, you see the Emperor, right? It's like, there's a bad guy named Isaac, and you don't think for a second that is Isaac Newton, and then towards the end of the show, they reveal the Isaac that's been the bad guy the whole time is Isaac Newton.
And the reveal is so great because they're like, it's Isaac Newton. And you're like, what? Like, the Isaac Newton? Yes. The Isaac Newton? Isaac Newton?
Calculus Apple guy, that one.
And the show is like, yes, exactly. The show, like, it's like they just put it in impact font and just put it on the front of the screen. Yes, it's Isaac Newton. And then everything goes off the fucking rails from there.
The gravity guy, that one. Anyway.
So the Outlaws kind of does the same thing. There is zero filler at all, and they just follow the plot to the ultimate end. And surprisingly, the actual meta plot, like what was going on, is a surprisingly complex, like high fantasy story that was way bigger than I expected and pretty good. Yeah. So the show was fantastic the way it ended. And I guess the things I would say about it without spoiling much is that, one, it doesn't do the thing that a lot of shows like this have done throughout all of history, where they don't let main characters fully power up, and they don't let main characters say, fuck it, I'm gonna live in the fantasy world, or why go back home? Like, isn't this place way better? It avoids all those old boring tropes and just goes full on in the right direction. Two, they put in as much gay content as possible, and they clearly made it so that it would be almost impossible to edit out of the show. And I think they did that on purpose to make it hard for Disney to put this show in certain markets. Like, they even
Disney could have always, not let them continue or, put in so.
Yep, they already had the budget, so they just made the show. And three, it has, it's a kid's show, and it has the meta plot or the meta story of you should forgive people, like someone who's a bad person, obviously circumstance led them to this. You can't, you've got to stop their actions, but you also have to understand why they're this way. But it also goes a step further to point out that you only give someone so many chances, and then you just don't give them any more chances, and maybe you got to kill them. Like, maybe they just can't be allowed to continue to do their thing.
Guillotines, they still work.
Yeah, the Outlaws kind of ends with...
As long as people have necks.
Yeah, the Outlaws kind of ends on a note of, there is a line beyond which, guillotine time, like Nuremberg trials. And I was surprised that the show went that far, and it does it in a really, really good way, in my opinion.
All right. I mean, I can appreciate that to some extent, right? I've been realizing more recently, like the past few years, that all the arts that I enjoy, at least fictional stories, are the ones that are, abstract, challenging, not having answers, being ambiguous, whatever, only asking questions, not giving answers, right?
Yep.
But if you're going to be the kind of story that, is giving answers, then you should be exactly what you just said, giving all the answers, not lazily forgetting plot threads so that the people are like, what about X character? We just never saw them again, or what?
Yep.
What happened?
Literally zero open questions of any importance.
That's tight writing to remember everything, to keep it all together, right?
But also the fact that the answers were all satisfying and didn't feel like hacked on at the end, that's extra rare. Yeah, it didn't even feel like fan service.
It's tough to be. That's really a skilled writing technique. Is how do you be satisfying without being fan service?
Yep.
Right?
Picard season 3 was moderately satisfying, but it was too much fan service. This somehow got that line right, and I struggle to think of many more examples of something that I would say struck that balance well.
Yeah, the key to being satisfying without being fan service, right? Is fan service is giving people what they want, and what they want is also what they think they want.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas not fan service is giving someone they wanted, but they didn't know they wanted it, and they didn't even conceive that it existed, right? But it pleases them once you deliver it. That's the correct way.
Like Evangelion, parts of Evangelion are like, oh, this is what you want? Here, I'm going to give you exactly what you want. That sucks, doesn't it? Guess what?
All
right, so you got some news?
Just a tiny news, right? We had Shin Godzilla came to the U.S. a long time ago, right? And then there was the Shin Ultraman, which I did manage to see. Did I actually talk about that on this show or not?
I am really sure you did, but I'd have to go look through the archive to be 100% sure.
It's not as good as Shin Godzilla, and it's better. It's really, more geared towards people who actually know things about Ultraman and care about Ultraman.
I think you did a full geek bite of it.
It's still okay. But yeah, Shin Kamen Rider is coming now to the U.S.
A one-night nationwide screening in Fathom Events.
Yep. So the way that works technologically is Fathom Events basically live streams it, but you can only watch the live stream from a movie theater. There's no way to watch it from your house without extreme hacking and decryption and whatnot. So the premiere is going to be at the Japan Society here in New York City. I already bought a ticket. So
I have to confirm exactly because I got to go to Colorado for my cousin's wedding, so I might be been home in time to see it. But if I am, I'll be like landing from Colorado that morning. But in which case, I'm gonna get a ticket.
Yeah, the thing is, my knowledge of Kamen Rider is, very basic level knowledge, right? So, hero guy on a motorcycle looks like a bug, has like a watch or a belt or something that transforms him.
You know what? I don't even care. I would go see this, and I think you should too if you're out there and you have the opportunity.
Yeah. And it's like, even though, Shin Ultraman was, okay, but not up to my, I guess, I don't know what expectation I had, but it wasn't Shin Godzilla good. But even if this is, if this is as good as Shin Ultraman, I won't feel bad about going to see it. So.
All right, put a little marker there. But anyway, things of the day. So Scott and I are actually, compared to the what I assume is the mean age of the listener, I feel like we're pretty old. So this is going to definitely cement in anyone's mind exactly how old we are, because this is a YouTube video. It's only 2 minutes long, and it steps through a full example of what every type of modem sounded like from the 300 baud era up to the 56K era. And if you don't know what a modem is, then that's not even how badly we're going to date ourselves. But this hit me so hard in the nostalgia. So my first modem was a 2400 baud modem. And I kind of forgot what it sounded like because in my head, like in my mind, I realized I only remembered what 33.6 and 56K modem sounded like. 2400 baud sounds way different. But as soon as I heard it, you know that phenomenon where like you can't remember the name of something and someone says the first syllable of it and your brain's like, oh, I remember now. It was that. Memories of childhood came flooding back in a huge way.
We had the 14.4 modem.
Whoa.
We didn't actually use it right away. We had the computer, we had the modem, but we weren't using it, right? And then eventually, we started using it. We started using it when everyone else was buying 28.8 modems.
Yep. So 2400 baud was V22. That was like 1982. Your 14.4, right. That was the second like class V32. That was 9.6 and 14.4. They're basically the same kind of modem.
Yep. But yeah, and then I bought a USB 56K modem in like 1999. That was all cool and transparent.
I never
on it.
In my life had or used a 56K modem because
56K modem could play Tribes 2 online with a bad,
like a 300 ping, but it worked.
It worked. Tribes 2 is surprisingly resilient to bad pings.
Yep.
And
But
I bought an Ethernet card and went to college.
see, so 28.8 and 33.6 came out in 1994, and in 1994 we got a V34 modem to do that, and I used that up until like 1996, and then we got a cable modem because the pilot program was in our neighborhood. So never had 56K. I had broadband in late 1996.
So my thing of the day is a website called makeitfrom.com, right? And let's say that you're some sort of engineer or manufacturer or something, and you need to choose a material to make something out of, right? It's like, well, this website has a database of materials, right? And they collected public data about the material property, the properties of those materials, right? So for example, let's see, magnesium alloys.
I'm clicking on that.
Magnesium alloy AZ91D. And we can see its Brinell hardness, its compressive crushing strength, its Young's tensile modulus, its elongation at break, its impact strength, its thermal properties, its electrical properties, its otherwise unclassified properties, like its base metal price, and et cetera, et cetera. Its composition, mostly magnesium with a little bit of aluminum, and then some really tiny amounts of zinc, manganese, silicon, et cetera. Right? And you can see this for a bunch of materials, and you can compare the materials to each other and make your choice about what you're gonna, choose.
Embodied energy. Embodied energy is a measure of the amount of electrical energy consumed. It just tells you everything, and it defines everything.
Yep, they collected all this data from public places and compiled it onto a text, easy to use, good UI website that is extremely useful if you do anything with metal, ceramic, plastic, etc.
I'm going to say right now, this is Web 4.0. Back to 1.0, but with modern technology. Just here's the information.
This website, Plain Text Sports, this is the right direction to go in, I think.
I think it is the right direction. Like, I'm dead. This is not a joke. We are dead serious about this.
Old websites had it right from the beginning.
Yep. Web 2.0 was an experiment. If you don't know what Web 2.0 is, because that's actually a long time ago, look at the current Geek Nights website from May 2023. I got to clarify because that might change in the nearing future. But I miss that wet internet. In the meta moment.
If you ever ask yourself the question, what should I make it from? Go to makeitfrom.com.
In the meta moment, the Geek Nights Book Club book, The Satanic Verses, the next Thursday show. We're just doing it. We're done with the book. It's a great book.
Did you finish reading every verse that Satan had to offer?
And I thoroughly enjoyed The Satanic Verses. And, I will admit, having not known a lot about the book when we came into this book club, I thought
the meta around the book. I didn't know anything about the content.
I imagined it would be like reading any classic important book in that I would enjoy it and I'd think a lot, but I'd also have to approach it from like I am analyzing this as I read it perspective. No, it's just a fucking fantasy book. I just read it like a fantasy book and it was fantastic as a fantasy book.
It's just a fantasy book.
It's just, the allegory is there. It's deep. It's dense. But I think the thing that stood out the most, we'll get into the actual show when we do the book club episode, was that it was one of those books, and I like it when this happens to me, where I'd be reading and I'm vibing, going along, and then the book would throw something at me, and I'd get like half a paragraph past it, and then I'd pause and be, wait a minute, what the fuck just happened? And I back up because something crazy just happened, and I had to back up and like be ready for it. That happened a bunch of times in this book, and it was great. So
even like the first chapter is like, what's happening?
Yeah.
What? That's what's happening? What?
And then you dive into movie star stories in India. You do dive. And then you dive again. Just keep diving. Let's make gods. So other meta bit, so you're all aware, I'm going to link to a thread in the Geek Nights forum, which you should join, partly because Twitter is a dying husk of its former self, and I barely use social media anymore, and I'm diving back into forums and discords and, all that other stuff. So in this thread, I have posted many examples of the new thumbnails that I've been creating for Geek Night stuff, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from the listener, and I've been making them better and better because it's literally driving traffic to our old lectures that people forgot about in a surprising way. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
All right. Geek Night's website is progressing extremely well. We just have to do now. We're in the polish. At least there are some features we should, gonna have to do after releasing. But I want to basically only narrow down to the things that are required for releasing only. And we just got to do those, and we can release and replace the old website, and then we can go and do all those other things after, and it'll be fine.
Yep. And at some point around the launch of the new Geek Nights website, I'm going to do it even if Scott doesn't want to do it, but we're just going to throw at probably a bar or restaurant or beer garden somewhere in Queens. Just going to throw a no-host party, meaning we're going to celebrate the new website, and if anyone, open invite for anyone to show up, you're paying for your own whatevers. I'm just going to be there. I'm not coordinating anything other than I will be there.
Oh, I see. And that's what you mean by no host. You're not going to call the place. You're just going to be like, I am going to be at this place that is a public.
Yep. From this hour to this hour, it is public. It's open seating. It's not going to be like a restaurant where oh, hey, I see you from the table that I got from the waiter. Get your own table and we won't talk.
We go to, since it's all warm.
Glacier Rock.
Well, you go there. You can go to one of the
Pig Beach
places. They all have, They got
John Brown's actually would be a good one with that huge outdoor area in the back.
I mean, Pig Beach is 3 John Browns.
I know, but John Brown's isn't that crowded, especially if we do this on any day that's not a Friday night, Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, Pig Beach is not crowded on a weekday either.
Exactly. So I'll post details as it comes, but I'll make a thread because if you're interested, let me know. I'm just curious. It would be nice to see the listener who lives somewhere in the New York area.
The one listener.
If you're that's our joke, calling the listener for humble brag reasons.
A joke though from some podcast.
Yes, I was about to say because I was going to steal a joke from The Simpsons about this, where Krusty's like, if your name's anyone but then I stole this. Then this is my bit. But I stole that joke from It's All Politics from NPR Podcasts.
Does that podcast still exist?
It does, but with different hosts and a slightly different name.
And they got rid of the joke?
They don't make that joke anymore.
Oh, it's ours now.
It's ours now. The listener. I guess we can get right into it. So, Suzume.
All right, so background info, right? Makoto Shinkai. This is, if you don't remember this person, back in the early 2000s, Makoto Shinkai made short animations in his basement by himself, possibly with his spouse, partner.
Yep. In the 90s, there were a couple of really small short films, but the one that you all know was Voices of a Distant Star, Hoshino Koe, in 2002.
The first time we ever saw anything by, Makoto Shinkai.
We were in college, and there was this buzz about this short thing, and someone fan-subbed it.
It's 5 minutes or 10, I don't know how long. It's not very long. It's very short. They played it at the anime club. Everyone was blown away by this very short animation.
People were, everybody was crying.
Yeah, and everyone was like, someone made that in their basement by themselves, and they even voice acted it themselves, but then the voice acting got replaced by professionals later.
Yeah.
It's that was one person doing, everyone was just losing their mind over this thing. And then we waited to see what Makoto Shinkai would do next. Right?
And it was a Guy Ritchie situation. Makoto Shinkai is good at longing, at will they, won't they, at cherry blossoms falling, at spectacular clouds and skyscapes and rainbows and sparkles.
Yep.
And making you cry.
The first time I saw another Makoto Shinkai work after that was what? Place Promised?
The Place Promised in our early days, which for a long time was my second favorite of his works. I like it. It's kind of weird, but it made me cry even harder than Hoshino Koe.
I mean, sure, it's these were, but he wasn't like some of the other people where it's everything he makes is a unmitigated hit, right? It's you can, it's just sometimes things are a bit off. Was Children Who Chase Lost Voices? Was that the one?
Yes.
New York Comic Con?
That was the one that was I don't know, a low rent, Laputa.
I couldn't understand what the hell was going on with that one.
It was low rent Laputa. The plot didn't make much sense.
We went to New York Comic Con. It was enormous screening. He was there. It's the first time we saw him in person. And yeah, that movie is what the fuck?
It was beautiful.
Sure, everything he does is beautiful.
Yep.
You know what the most beautiful Makoto Shinkai works are? His commercials.
Oh, right?
Go look on YouTube for Makoto Shinkai TV commercials. They are unbelievable. Right?
Yep. Then there was 5 centimeters per second.
Yeah. The point is, Makoto Shinkai was sort of, he was successful enough that he kept making movies, but he didn't really come until Your Name, right? Your Name, is it like the still the most grossing animated thing ever, or like it's enormous, right? It has like some enormous record.
I'm looking to see what the current state of that is.
Japanese box office for 12 non-consecutive weekends. It grossed 25.17 billion yen. The highest grossing non-Hollywood film in China up until 2 Indian movies displaced it, right? So Your Name was just absolutely... Did we do an episode on Your Name?
We had to have. It was #1 in South Korea. It was #1 in Thailand. Like this was like one of the biggest movies ever.
It was one of the biggest movies ever, one of the biggest animated movies ever, period. So that's like, boom. Then Weathering with You, we did an episode on that one. I was disappointed in Weathering with You, mostly for several reasons.
The message, I disagreed with what appeared to be the message of it, honestly.
Yes, there were many good parts of it, but I agree, Rim, the biggest bad part was the message. The message was humans will find a way to survive. Don't bother trying to fix to prevent
Don't sacrifice your own happiness to prevent climate change.
Right, because humans will find a way to survive even if there's terrible climate disaster. And it's like, that's the wrong message.
Yep.
By a lot. So he comes up with another movie, and all we know about this movie going in is it's another Makoto Shinkai joint, and 2, so one of the characters turns into a chair, a literal chair made of wood, the thing you sit on, a small one that a child would sit on, like that would go at a child's desk, like a tiny one.
Yep.
Right? A human is transformed magically into a piece of furniture that a child would sit on. And that's the 2 things we know about this movie going in. And I'm like, well, Makoto Shinkai's coming to the museum near me for the East Coast premiere, whatever, right? I'll go see it, and I'll see what he's got to say. Now I haven't seen this guy in 10 years plus, right? We'll see what's going on.
And you know what? Honestly, it was pretty great. Like, I think it's one of his best works. Also,
I actually like it better than Your Name.
I also like it better than Your Name. Yeah. I see why Your Name would probably be seen by many film people as a better constructed movie.
I think it might have just... I also highly suspect it could have been a timing issue. If this had come out when Your Name came out, and Your Name came out now, would the box office grosses have just been reversed?
It's hard to say. Like, I would struggle to take a strong stance on that question. Mm-hmm. And also, it's doing great. It is already itself the 4th highest grossing Japanese film of all time.
Yep. I think the one thing that might hurt it at the box office compared to Your Name is that it's a little bit Japanese centric, right?
Yep.
Whereas Your Name is sort of universal.
So there's a lot going on here. At the end, we're going to talk about some of the spoilery things because just go see this movie. Like,
it's not really a spoilery kind of movie.
No, but
like there's no surprise or secret that's revealed or anything like that. It's just, it's about character development.
Yep. There's a few things I think
really any major events in the movie.
But there are a few things I wouldn't really want. I think it would be better for people to not know going in. But we'll get to that at the end. But what I would say is 1, it's great. But 2, you know what it is? It's a road trip movie. This is about people going on a road trip to process trauma from their past.
That's correct.
That's what this movie is. Yep. And it does it so well, and the characters are every single character in the show is a fantastic character.
Yeah, I think some of the characters were sort of thrown in, not fully developed or necessary, but I still enjoyed them. So I guess they had purpose in that. Like, for the best example, obviously, is, the Showa idol music guy.
Oh, right.
Right? It's like, that guy sort of came in the, way late in the movie to introduce a character with speaking lines, right? Pretty much. And wasn't that significant, and you probably could have had the movie without him. Like, it sort of felt a little bit awkward, but it sort of worked because he was not awkward just to the audience showing up late, but that's his relationship with the main characters, like an awkward guy who shows up late.
Yep.
at a weird time. But he was a very enjoyable character, because he was sort of, like that wacky side character almost, right? Who's a lot of fun. But, he could have not been there and it would have still been fine. Right?
Yep.
So,
and I guess the other main thing that I think really made this stand out is that, and Makoto Shinkai did this with Your Name too, in that in Your Name, there's magic-y stuff happening, and it is literally happening. The movie makes it quite abundant. That's not like allegory. I mean, it is allegory, but it also literally directly happened. Like, characters remember the specifics of the magic that happened. It is real. And this movie does the same thing. There's a moment where the characters who have not been involved in the magic BS encounter the magic BS, and their response is, whoa, there's some magic BS going on. And I think the message of this one, like, unlike Weathering with You, was also good. I think it was actually a nuanced message.
This had the message, yes, good. Not.
And it was multiple messages. There were messages about unpacking trauma and facing trauma, messages about, like, talking to family and talking to people and making human connections. But there was also messages about, if there's a problem, go deal with it, which was kind of the opposite message of Weathering with You. I'm comparing the two a lot because I do feel like this was, I don't know if he intended it.
With you that much, you can't get away from it.
Yeah, but I almost
that's a Rim thing. Rim will find a thing and have a criticism of it, and then just keep bringing it up.
Because things get stuck in my craw, and Weathering with You,
it's in your craw and it never gets out.
Well, it especially bothered me because since Weathering with You came out, like, a lot of things in the real world have gotten worse and worse and worse in a way that people need to make sacrifices to try to stop.
Yep. But yeah, it's like basically anytime Weathering with You comes up, or anytime something reminds Rim of Weathering with You, it'll pop out of his craw and he'll be like, oh, the message of that movie, I hated it. It's this is
I forgot that was in my craw, but it came back out.
And it's like, everyone's already heard you say that the last time it popped out of the craw. Keep it in the craw.
So what is this actually about? Like, really, like, it's a road trip movie, but basically this girl, and it gets right to the point. This movie does not belabor getting to the magic nonsense.
The only remaining family is her aunt, and she lives with her aunt and goes to school. She's a teenage-ish, like, young teen. How old is she? Like 13, 14?
17, high school.
Oh, 17? I don't know. She's teenage-aged, right? And she lives with her aunt only.
Yep.
And
biking to school, meets a weird guy who's clearly up to something in a anime magical way, interacts with him briefly, but then just continues on to school. And then at school, and the guy asks something weird. He's like, hey, are there any abandoned ruins around here? And she's like, yeah, that way. Weird question to ask, but whatever. And then she goes to school, and there's kind of an earthquake, and then she sees a bunch of magical shit happening off in the distance in the direction of the ruin she pointed the weird guy at, and nobody else can see this biz, and she's like, fuck school, I'm going to immediately go look into this, which is the correct thing to do.
I guess, or unless you're actually hallucinating, in which case it'd be the wrong thing to do.
Well, I would do one of two things. I would either
think that within the world of the movie, she wasn't hallucinating and the magic was real.
I'll tell you what, I would go and check it out, and if there was nothing weird going on there, I would immediately go straight to the doctor.
What if you went there and you were still hallucinating the shit? How would you know it was real or not?
If the hallucination were that self-consistent, I'm fucked anyway.
Yeah, the point is, the moving chair sort of confirmed, right?
Yeah.
the guy
especially when other people see the moving chair. Like, people are basically, like, posting on Twitter, like, I saw a fucking moving chair, and, like, she sees it everywhere.
Right. The guy was fighting the evils that are underneath the earth that are coming and causing disasters.
Yep, through these magic doors. There's a whole, like, magical plot.
He's got to make sure the doors stay closed and whatnot, and sealed.
Yep.
And he gets turned into a chair because she does something, she messes around with the keystone or whatever, when she shouldn't have.
Yep. She picks up a rock that's kind of shaped like a cat, and she's like, I wonder what this is. And then it thaws. This all happens in, like, the first 6 minutes of the movie. So
yep.
It, like, thaws and turns into a magic looking cat that says cryptic stuff and runs away. And then all hell breaks loose. And then the magic guy's like, what the fuck did you do?
Yep, you fucked up the magic, and now the evil's coming out. It's your fault.
Yep.
I got turned into a chair, so now you have to fix it. I can't fix it. I'm a chair.
So now it's a road trip movie.
No, I'm a chair.
And then the magic cat runs off and gets on a ferry, and then the chair's like, we got to do something about this. So she grabs the chair, and the two of them run onto the ferry, and then the ferry basically goes, like, 4 hours away. Like, it goes way far away.
It's like, in the one hand, it's a road trip, but on the other hand, it's a chase, right? It's like her and the chair Well, she's chasing the cat and she's carrying the chair. The chair is also chasing the cat.
Yep.
It's a chair. It's a guy. It's a, you know.
And she very smartly is like, "You're a chair. What the fuck are you gonna do?"
Right. So because she's not hallucinating, she's going for it. And then the aunt is worried.
Yeah,
right?
well, she calls the aunt, this is why it's such a road trip movie, because she calls her aunt late at night on the ferry. She's like, "Yeah, I'm like staying over at so-and-so's house. I'll be back tomorrow." And then the next day she wakes up like 100 miles away from home, like, and then doesn't make it home that night. And she calls her aunt like that night. It's like, "Yeah, not gonna make it home again." And the aunt's like, "Where are you?" And there's this great scene where she like, because this keeps happening to the point where the aunt acts like a normal adult and is like, "You get your ass home right now, or like I'm coming after you. What's wrong?" Yeah. And then she like sends this long text to the aunt, and then she just like turns her phone off, like doesn't want to deal with it. And later on, like she opens the phone and there is like a 400-line text waiting for her, and she's reading it like, "Oh my God." And before she can even begin to respond, another 400-line text like appears from the aunt, and she's just like, "Oh shit." And there's lots of just fun moments like that. All the characters act like they live in the modern world where cell phones and Reddit and Twitter and things exist. And it's just a very like modern sensibility movie.
But it's not like, you know, Belle where it's about the internet. It's a very much takes place like in the real world. It's just
exactly.
people have modern technology because it's taking place in 2022, 3, whatever year.
Yep.
Right. So.
And yeah, the movie just keeps going from there, and it moves.
The chair thing seems like so ridiculous from the trailer or from just hearing that a guy turns into a chair. But when you see the movie, first of all, he's not a chair actually he's a chair for a smaller portion of the movie than you think.
But it is still like a good chunk of the movie.
Yeah, it's you know, a big chunk, but it's less he turns unchairs at some point, right? It's, you know.
Well, because really it's not about him. It's about the girl and her aunt.
Exactly. But it's a lot less silly in context, obviously. Right?
Yep.
It's not don't go in thinking it's some nonsense thing. It's, you know.
Yep, and what
has a meaning? There's a reason it's a chair.
The chair has a literal plot reason that literally it has to be a chair, and it also has a very profound allegorical reason that it's a chair, and it's also we talked about this when we there was a news about how he said he made the director Shinkai said he made it a chair.
That news was slightly different from what he said when I saw him. So
yep.
You know.
And he said slightly different things every time he's talked about it. And I actually read a ton more interviews since then. So I guess I'll address it now. My personal best summary, based on reading 4 different interviews where he explained this different ways through translation, so like take this with a pretty good chunk of salt, is the producer told him, "You've got to have a romantic interest. You can't just make the other character a girl," which obviously that's a can of worms. But Shinkai was like, "But I don't want to do a romance." And the producer kind of forced him to. So he was like, "I got to make it something else." And he thought about making it like the guy gets turned into a monster, or the guy gets turned into like random objects as they move along. Anything to make him not a hot boy, so there isn't romantic tension during the story, because he didn't want that to happen. He did not want to distract from the story of the girl and her aunt with a will they won't they romance. And he settled on a chair, and then he came up with a really good reason why it had to be a chair. And if you didn't know that backstory, if you never read one of those articles or heard any of those interviews, you would think it was a chair from day one, because the chair is crucial to everything this movie is about in profound, direct ways. I would be surprised if I learned after seeing it that the chair was because of all these other reasons.
So the vibe I got when we saw him in person, and they obviously through a translator, he spoke to us, right, was that, you know, he has the signature thing he always does: clouds, romance, lovers separated by space and time.
Yep.
Every single one of these movies, every single one of his works, except maybe some TV commercials, even some of those have it, right? It's like, and he like didn't want to do what he's always done. He wanted to do something different.
He wanted to do clouds, family trauma, and family stuff. I
don't even know if he wanted to do the clouds, but basically,
I think he wanted to do the clouds.
He said that the producer, was like, "Listen, I know you want to do something different, but it's like, this is what you're known for. You're good at it. that's what's successful. This is still capitalism.
It's telling that every single movie poster shows the girl and the guy in non-share form, like standing next to each other in some fashion.
Yep. He's like, so you still have to include that to some extent. And so he included his trademark things to basically this minimal extent to where, his stamp is on it. You can tell immediately that this is a Shinkai work, but it is not the focus of the work the way it is in a lot of the others, right?
Yep.
It's just sort of off to the side and is not center stage. It's like side stage. So,
and
the other things he interestingly said, the biggest interesting thing he said when he spoke was that, we talked about for Hokushi no Koei, he made it like in his basement by himself, right? Mostly. He said that the way he made this is the way he makes everything, is he storyboarded the whole thing in his basement or wherever his studio in his house by himself, right? He voice acted every character, recorded it at home with his own microphone by himself, right? And basically, once he had a storyboard with everything voice acted for the whole movie, and it was all done, which took like 2 years, then he brings in the whole animation studio, right, with everyone else, and they make the real movie from that. So he still does it that way. Nobody else does it that way that I'm aware of, and at least not for movies, not for TV episodes either. So that's wild.
Yep.
That he still does that, and somehow gets away with it. But I guess they don't want to mess with success, so they let it keep going.
And what else could we say other than doing a very long, like, final thoughts style, like, let's dive into all the allegories?
The only other thing I would say is that compared to his other movies, which I think some of the other ones had parts that didn't make sense, didn't fit together, were a little bit nonsensical, were a little bit muddy, and he could have used a lot of editing, right? This one did not need the editing so much. It was very well put together, tightly structured, well paced, except for maybe a little part when they're towards the end, but not really. So definitely his most well structured plot.
I mean, the movie is 122 minutes, like, it's long. But at no point was I don't think I looked at my watch once. The movie just washed over me to the end, and I didn't realize how long it was until, like, we walked out of the theater, and I was like, wait a minute, what time is it?
For an animated movie, so...
Yep. Thankfully, we saw it at the Alamo Draft House in Manhattan, which I didn't realize was in the sub basement of, like, 28 Liberty down there. It's way deep.
I'm gonna go to the movie theater I can walk to.
But I guess the last thing I would say is that what the movie is about, because on one hand, it is about it's about the magical stuff, like that literally happens.
It's about the earthquake.
Yep. It's about the earthquake that caused the Fukushima disaster, like, directly in the plot, but allegorically it almost uses the allegory of the girl and her aunt dealing with their shared trauma, but also society collectively dealing with its shared trauma of what happened, because, like, where her childhood home that was destroyed is directly relevant. And Shinkai has talked a lot about how the 2011 earthquake affected him and how it was a big part of the inspiration for this movie.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that's the thing that all happens is that anytime there's a major human event, positive or negative, but sadly, especially the negative ones, right, that immediately sort of causes, artists, filmmakers, writers, right? It's like, you could go cause a disaster on purpose, or one happens by accident. And if anything is significant, if it's remembered, if it makes the news, there's going to be books about it. There might be a documentary about it.
I mean, there's still, like, World War II movies are still very, very common in the year 2023.
The bigger the event, the bigger the more art it spawns, right? World War II was so big that the art will probably never stop coming, right? As long as there is still people alive who remember.
As long as the thing that got everyone to forget about World War I doesn't happen.
Yes. But yeah, it's like, so that earthquake, it's like the timing of it, right? It's like if he would have come out with this movie too soon after the earthquake, you're in that sort of, depending on the tone of your artwork that goes to a disaster, you sort of have to work on your timing, right? So you can't come out with an animated movie about an earthquake immediately after the earthquake. You got to put some space between it, right?
But I think that space was extra important for this movie because the movie was also, it wasn't just about unpacking trauma. It was about unpacking distant trauma. Like the main character, she's unpacking trauma from, she's 17 from like 10, 12 years ago.
Yep. Well, I think that's the one thing he still kept in the lovers in this movie. They were not separated by space and time. They were separated by one of them being a chair.
Yeah.
But there was still a separation, right, between, the horrific events, right, of the past and, the main character time-wise, right? A time separation and a space separation, which she closes, and the time separation, which is expanding, right? And it's different where when you have the lovers who are separated, they're trying to connect and reach out to each other, right, over a long distance. Whereas here, it's like when it's a trauma, you're trying to get away from it.
Yep.
Right.
And by trying to get away from it, you end up heading straight toward it. And then because magic stuff, you get a little bit of a time loop type situation with the magic.
Yep.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And of course,
I wouldn't say that this is like some S tier anime, right? But I would still say that, like, are you going to see anime movies that came out this year? It's like, or, I guess within the past year, or whatever. I don't know when it actually came out in Japan, but, I guess it's the same as, is it better than Bell? That's a close race. That's right. It's like,
I think part of what's going on here is because Hosoda and Shinkai are both younger creators who are creating more modern works.
They're like, they're still old.
Yeah, they are. But think about the vibe of both of them and their movies. Like, technology is used the way young people actually use it. The world and the plot exist in a modern, like, setting. And it's not like a lot of older filmmakers will make a movie set in current day, current time, but, like, nobody has cell phones for some reason. Like, that still happens.
Shinkai is 50 and Hosoda is 55.
Yep. But the movies still speak to a younger, more modern sensibility in a very direct way. I think we can stop there.